Welcome to this journey through one of the most disturbing cases recorded in the history of the Ozark Mountains. Before we begin, I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact time you're listening to this narration. We're interested in knowing to what places and at what times of day or night these documented stories reach. In the autumn of 1881, the small settlement of Hollow Creek, nestled in the dense forests of the Ozark Mountains, became the center of a series of events that would haunt the region for generations. The story of Sheriff Malcolm Thorne remains one of the most perplexing and disturbing cases in American frontier history. Official records state that on the night of October 17, 1881, Sheriff Thorne was shot 6 times during an ambush near Asher Creek, yet somehow managed to return to town, a medical impossibility that launched decades of speculation, fear, and hushed conversations throughout Marion County and beyond. The case might have remained buried in county archives were it not for the discovery of a collection of journals, letters, and official correspondences found during the renovation of the old Marion County Courthouse in 1964. What was initially dismissed as a simple tale of frontier resilience soon revealed itself as something far more disturbing, a tapestry of small-town secrets, medical anomalies, and the dark undercurrents that ran through post-Civil War America. The documents paint a picture not of heroism, but of something profoundly unsettling at the heart of Hollow Creek. What follows is a careful reconstruction based on these recovered documents, newspaper clippings from the Springfield Republican and Baxter County Citizen, personal diaries, medical examiner notes, and interviews conducted with descendants of the original witnesses by historian Dr. Eleanor Klein in 1968. Some names have been changed or omitted at the request of living relatives. The settlement of Hollow Creek no longer appears on modern maps. For good reason, some might say. The Ozarks of 1881 were a world unto themselves. The rugged mountain range stretching across southern Missouri, northern Arkansas, and portions of Oklahoma remained largely isolated from the rapid industrialization transforming America's cities. Deep valleys, locally known as hollows, sheltered communities that operated according to their own customs and informal laws, often with minimal interference from state or federal authorities. The Civil War had ended 16 years prior, yet its shadows lingered across the region with divided loyalties and old grievances simmering beneath the surface of daily life. Hollow Creek began as many Ozark settlements did, a collection of hardy families seeking isolation and self-sufficiency in the rugged landscape. Situated approximately 12 miles southwest of what is now Bull Shoals Lake, the community was established in the 1850s by 3 families, the Suttons, the Hargroves, and the Millers, who had traveled west from Tennessee seeking cheaper land and fewer neighbors. By 1881, it had grown to around 60 permanent residents, with perhaps another 100 scattered throughout the surrounding hollows and valleys. County records indicate that Hollow Creek was officially recognized in 1857, though it never incorporated as a proper town. The settlement centered around a small general store, a one-room schoolhouse, and a modest wooden church. A grist mill operated on Asher Creek, approximately 1 mile south of the main settlement, providing a crucial service for local farmers and forming the economic heart of the community. The nearest telegraph office was in Yellville, nearly 20 miles away, meaning news traveled slowly, and the outside world remained at a comfortable distance. The terrain surrounding Hollow Creek was typical of the Ozarks: steep limestone bluffs, dense oak and hickory forests, and narrow valleys carved by countless springs and creeks. The White River ran approximately 7 miles to the east, providing a tenuous connection to larger settlements like Yellville and Mountain Home. The isolation fostered a fierce independence among the residents, but also a deep interdependence when it came to survival. Folks in the hollers needed each other, wrote Eli Parsons, a traveling peddler whose journal from 1875-1883 provides valuable insights into the region. Not a family could make it alone, not truly. They'd share work, share meat, share medicine, but they'd never share secrets. Every home kept its shadows tucked away tight. Into this setting came Malcolm Thorne in the spring of 1878, a man in his early 40s with what witnesses described as a military bearing, though no record exists of his service during the Civil War. Tall and lean with a face weathered beyond his years, Thorne spoke little of his past before arriving in Marion County. The 1880 census lists his previous residence simply as Virginia, with no further details. Within 6 months of his arrival, he had secured appointment as sheriff, unusual for an outsider, but explained in county records as a response to increasing tensions between several prominent families in the area. Sheriff Thorne was not a man given to conversation, wrote Abigail Merriweather in her household diary from 1879 to 1882. He performed his duties with efficiency and coldness, though none could fault his effectiveness. Still, there was something in his eyes that made the children hide when he passed our home, something that seemed to look through you rather than at you. This would be the first of many references to Thorne's unsettling gaze found throughout the collected documents. A tintype photograph of Thorne, dated approximately 1879 and discovered among the courthouse documents, shows a man of stern countenance. His face is long and angular, with deep-set eyes under heavy brows and a mouth set in what might be described as a permanent grimace. His beard is neatly trimmed, suggesting a man of discipline despite the frontier setting. Most striking is his posture, ramrod straight, shoulders squared, hands positioned precisely at his sides. The photographer's note on the reverse reads simply, "Sheriff M. Thorne. Would not smile despite request." The limited records of Thorne's official activities from 1878 to 1881 show a man of methodical habits. His monthly reports to the county seat documented even minor infractions, public drunkenness, property disputes, livestock theft, with unusual detail. He maintained a precise schedule of patrols throughout the county, reportedly covering distances on horseback that local riders considered excessive for both man and animal. The sheriff rode out in all weather, noted James Hargrove, father of Jacob, in a deposition regarding a property dispute in 1880. Seeing him ride through hail that would fell a cow, not so much as ducking his head, man's got iron for bones, I reckon. The Hollow Creek of 1881 was, by all accounts, a community under strain. Though superficially peaceful, several sources indicate deepening divisions following a disputed land claim between the Hargrove and Sutton families, whose properties bordered Asher Creek. The dispute had escalated over water rights critical for both families' livestock. The original survey markers had been washed away in a flood the previous spring, leading to conflicting claims about the proper boundary line. Jacob Hargrove built a small dam to divert water for his cattle, wrote Town Clerk Hiram Potter in an official complaint filed in June 1881. Michael Sutton claims this has reduced the flow to his own property downstream by half. Both men have produced documents supporting their respective positions. Sheriff Thorne has been called to mediate 3 separate confrontations in the past month alone. These confrontations had grown increasingly hostile. A letter from Martha Sutton to her cousin in Springfield, dated August 12, 1881, describes one such incident. Michael came home with his shirt torn and a bruise upon his cheek. Says Jacob Hargrove and his eldest boy caught him moving stones from their dam and set upon him. Would have been worse, he says, had Sheriff Thorne not appeared almost from nowhere. Didn't hear his horse approach, Michael said. The sheriff just stepped between them, quiet as death, and the fight went out of everyone. The sheriff keeps the peace, wrote Reverend William Finch in a letter to his brother in Springfield, dated July 1881. But there is a queer tension in his methods. He does not threaten. He merely stands and watches, and somehow this is more effective than any show of force might be. The Suttons and Hargroves quiet themselves in his presence, though I've noticed they watch him with a peculiar mix of fear and something else I cannot name. The sheriff lived alone in a small cabin attached to the jailhouse, a stone structure with 2 cells that rarely held more than the occasional drunk or troublemaker passing through. He took his meals at the widow Carson's boarding house, but seldom engaged in conversation. Town records show he maintained meticulous documentation of his activities, filing detailed reports with the county administrators in Yellville twice monthly. A curious entry in Widow Carson's household accounts book, discovered among her effects after her death in 1912, notes, "Sheriff takes dinner at 6 precisely each evening, always the same portion. Never seen him finish a plate yet, leaves no scraps, pays promptly, does not care for conversation during meals. Requested room be moved from east side to north, prefers less sunlight," were his words exact. The widow's granddaughter, interviewed by Dr. Klein in 1967, recalled her grandmother's discomfort around the sheriff. Grandma said he never seemed to blink enough. Said sometimes he'd sit so still at the table she'd have to watch careful to see if his chest moved with breathing. Said once she accidentally brushed his hand while serving and it felt cold as clay, despite it being August. Of course, she was old when she told me these things. Might have been confused with someone else. There was nothing to suggest what would happen, wrote Dr. Thomas Jenkins, the town's physician, in his medical journal. Nothing at all to prepare us for that night in October. The events of October 17, 1881, exist in multiple, sometimes contradictory accounts. The core facts agreed upon by most sources are these. Sheriff Thorne rode out alone toward Asher Creek around 4 in the afternoon after receiving word of another confrontation between the Hargrove and Sutton families. A message had been delivered to the sheriff's office by young Timothy Miller, age 12, who reported seeing the Hargrove men and Sutton men shouting and showing guns down by the creek bend. According to Timothy's statement, recorded by Town Clerk Potter the following day, "Sheriff didn't say nothing when I told him. Just stood up slow and got his gun belt. Told me to go home direct and stay there. His eyes looked different than usual, colder somehow, like he knew something bad was coming." Sheriff Thorne did not return that evening as expected. At approximately 9:30 p.m., several residents reported hearing distant gunshots. Most accounts specify 6 distinct shots from the direction of Asher Creek. Town records indicate that Walter Carson, son of the widow, and Elijah Parker considered organizing a search party, but ultimately decided to wait until morning, citing the dangerous terrain and moonless night. The following morning, against all reasonable expectation, Sheriff Malcolm Thorne walked into Hollow Creek. According to Dr. Jenkins's medical journal, Thorne appeared at my door at approximately 6:15 a.m., upright but deathly pale. His clothing was soaked with blood, and upon examination I discovered entry wounds consistent with 6 separate gunshots, 2 to the chest, 1 to the abdomen, 1 to the right thigh, 1 grazing the neck, and 1 through the left shoulder. Any one of the chest or abdominal wounds should have proven fatal. How he remained conscious, let alone ambulatory, defies all medical understanding. The doctor's detailed notes describe the wounds with clinical precision. First chest wound entered between 4th and 5th ribs, left side, approximately 2 inches from sternum. Exit wound present on back, suggesting bullet passed through lung and possibly nicked left atrium based on trajectory. Second chest wound entered below right clavicle, no exit wound located. Probing indicates bullet lodged near scapula. Abdominal wound entered right quadrant, exit through lower back, suggesting transit through liver. Given blood loss and wound characteristics, patient should, by all medical knowledge, be deceased. Jenkins's journal goes on to describe treating the wounds, noting with increasing disbelief the sheriff's apparent lucidity throughout the procedure. "He refused laudanum," Jenkins wrote, "and made no sound as I extracted 2 bullets and cleaned the wounds. The others had passed through. He lost a quantity of blood that should have rendered him unconscious at minimum, yet he maintained awareness, and even discussed the identity of his attackers. Thorne reportedly identified Jacob Hargrove and 2 unnamed men as his assailants, claiming they had ambushed him near the disputed property line. His statement, transcribed by Town Clerk Potter, was remarkably devoid of emotion or urgency. Rode to Asher Creek. Found Hargrove and 2 men not from these parts. They had rifles. I approached openly. Hargrove fired first. 5 more shots followed. I fell into the creek. They believed me dead and departed. When I regained my senses, I returned to town. The clinical detachment of this account, given while suffering from wounds that should have been fatal, disturbed Dr. Jenkins deeply. In a personal note appended to his medical records, he wrote, "In 15 years of medical practice, including 4 years as a field surgeon during the war, I have never witnessed a man speak so calmly while so gravely injured." More disturbing still was his response when I expressed amazement at his survival. He looked at me with those peculiar eyes and said simply, "The creek water helped." I found myself unable to ask what he meant. A posse was quickly formed to apprehend Jacob Hargrove, but upon reaching his homestead, they found the entire family, Jacob, his wife Sarah, and their 3 children, had abandoned their property overnight, leaving most possessions behind. The house was as if they had simply stood up from dinner and walked away, wrote posse member Elijah Carson in a statement to the county court. Food remained on the table, clothes in the wardrobes. Only themselves and their horses were gone, as if they'd fled in terrible haste. A subsequent inventory of the Hargrove property, conducted by Town Clerk Potter, confirms this impression of sudden departure. The document lists numerous valuable items left behind: silver cutlery set, wedding gift per neighbor's statement, family Bible containing birth records, winter clothing, preserved food stores sufficient for several months, Sarah Hargrove's sewing machine, significant investment, children's toys, including hand-carved wooden animals. Most telling was the discovery of a half-written letter on the kitchen table, apparently in Sarah Hargrove's hand. The fragment, preserved in the county records, reads, "Dearest sister, I write in great distress. Jacob has done something terrible, though he swears it was necessary. He says we must leave immediately, tonight, as the sheriff is not what we—" The letter ends mid-sentence, the pen having apparently been set down abruptly, never to be taken up again. This unexplained disappearance marked the beginning of what would become known locally as the quiet time in Hollow Creek, a period of approximately 3 weeks during which Sheriff Thorne recovered from wounds that should have killed him, and the community surrounding him began to change in subtle, disturbing ways. Dr. Jenkins' notes from this period grow increasingly perplexed as he documented Thorne's recovery. October 19th, removed dressings to find wounds already forming granulation tissue. No signs of infection despite creek water contamination. Patient's pulse remains unusually slow, approximately 40 beats per minute, yet he displays no symptoms of bradycardia. Temperature consistently below normal at 96.3 degrees. October 21st, patient shows remarkable healing. Wounds that should require weeks to close are already forming strong scar tissue. No sign of infection despite the severity and circumstances of injuries. Temperature normal. Pulse steady, but unusually slow. October 23rd, patient requested removal of all bandages against medical advice. Chest wounds now appear as raised pink scars, as if months old rather than days. Probed for bullet previously lodged near scapula, but could not locate it. Patient suggested it may have worked its way out, though no exit wound is visible. October 25th, removed stitches today. Scars already appear months old rather than days. Patient has resumed limited duties despite my strongest objections. When questioned about his unusual recovery, he simply stated, "I've always healed quick, doctor." I find myself avoiding prolonged eye contact with him. During Thorne's recovery, several residents reported unusual behavior from their livestock. Cattle refused to graze in certain pastures near Asher Creek. Dogs in town would bark incessantly throughout the night, only to fall silent whenever Sheriff Thorne walked past. These details might seem insignificant, but they appear with such consistency across multiple independent accounts that they cannot be dismissed as mere coincidence. William Miller, whose farm lay nearest to the site of the shooting, noted in his field journal, October 20th, "Cows won't go near the south pasture, the one that borders the creek, where they found blood. Drive them that way and they balk, roll their eyes, showing white all around. Even whipping won't move them. Lost milk production by half this week. The animals know something we don't. More troubling were the changes observed in the sheriff himself. While all was described as taciturn and somewhat cold, multiple sources note a new quality to his demeanor following the shooting. "He moves different now," wrote Josephine Miller in a letter to her sister in November 1881. "Before, he was stiff like a soldier. Now he moves too smooth, like water flowing downhill. And his eyes, I cannot describe what's changed about them, only that something has." The town council meets with him behind closed doors nearly every evening now, and none will speak of what is discussed. Thomas Blackwood, a blacksmith whose shop afforded a view of the sheriff's office, kept a daily log of business activities that incidentally documented Thorne's movements. Entries from before October 17th typically noted the sheriff's precise schedule: sheriff out on patrol 8 a.m. sharp, or sheriff returned 6 p.m. exactly, regular as clockwork. Entries after October 25th, when Thorne resumed duties, show a marked change. Sheriff moved past shop sometime this morning, didn't hear him approach. And later, sheriff appeared at Miller Farm. Didn't see him on the road, though. He'd have to pass shop to get there. By November, Blackwood's entries show increasing unease. Sheriff standing outside jail at dusk. Turned to watch me close shop. Felt his eyes all the way home. Of particular note is an entry from November 6th. Sheriff visited 3 houses tonight after dark. Carson's, then Miller's, then Widow Parker's. Stays about 20 minutes at each. No lantern carried, same pattern as last week. All 3 households have been sickly lately. By early November, Sheriff Thorne had resumed his full duties. No trace of Jacob Hargrove or his family was ever found, despite searches throughout the region. The Hargrove property was quietly absorbed by the town council and later redistributed among several families, including the Suttons. The disputed water rights issue that had sparked the initial conflict was never mentioned in public again. Town council minutes from November 7, 1881, contain a cryptic entry. Matter of unoccupied Hargrove property resolved. Sheriff's proposal accepted unanimously. Arrangement to continue as discussed. No further documentation required per council vote. This reference to an arrangement appears repeatedly in private correspondence from this period, though never with sufficient context to determine its precise nature. What is clear from multiple sources is that following the sheriff's recovery, a new order established itself in Hollow Creek, one characterized by unusual compliance and productivity, coupled with a pervasive, unnatural quiet. "The whole town walks softly now," wrote Reverend Finch in another letter to his brother, dated November 12, 1881. "Sunday service attendance has nearly doubled, yet the congregation sits in perfect silence before and after. No one speaks of the sheriff's miraculous recovery or the Hargrove's disappearance. When I attempted to address it in a sermon on divine intervention, I was visited that very evening by council members who suggested I focus on more traditional biblical teachings. I find myself unable to sleep through the night, listening for sounds I cannot name." A journal believed to belong to council member Walter Carson, though the handwriting is sometimes difficult to attribute with certainty, contains an entry dated November 15th. The agreement is unpleasant but necessary. Sheriff made the terms clear: protection, prosperity, order. The cost is not insignificant, but divided among many, it becomes bearable. Some show signs of weakness sooner than others. We will adjust the rotation accordingly. The Reverend's correspondence becomes increasingly disturbed over the following weeks, culminating in a final letter dated December 3, 1881. "I am leaving Hollow Creek. I can no longer serve this community in good conscience. Something fundamental has changed here, brother. The sheriff watches us all, and the people watch each other. I feel eyes on me constantly. What happened that night by Asher Creek was no miracle, but I dare not write what I suspect. I have accepted a position in Springfield and will explain more when we meet in person." Reverend Finch never arrived in Springfield. The stagecoach carrying him was found abandoned approximately 20 miles north of Hollow Creek, the driver and all passengers missing. An investigation by the county marshal found no signs of robbery or violence. The case was eventually closed unsolved. A note in Sheriff Thorne's official report simply states, "Evidence suggests animal attack or exposure. Search terminated due to winter conditions." As winter settled over the Ozarks, Hollow Creek fell into what multiple accounts describe as an unnatural quiet. The usual social gatherings, barn raisings, quilting circles, community suppers continued, but observers noted a mechanical quality to these interactions, as if residents were performing normalcy rather than living it. A traveling salesman, Horace Pinkerton, whose territory included the Hollow Creek area, wrote in his company report in January 1882, "Previously reliable customers in this settlement have altered their behavior notably. They purchase goods with minimal conversation, offer no refreshment or lodging as was customary, and seem eager for me to conduct my business and depart. Most concerning is their physical appearance, pallid complexions, moving slowly as if exhausted, yet the farms and businesses show signs of significant productivity. Several customers requested unusual quantities of iron supplements and tonics for general weakness, though none would elaborate on specific symptoms. Most disturbing are entries from Dr. Jenkins's medical journal describing an unusual pattern of health issues emerging in the community. December 15th. Treated Martha Sutton for profound anemia. Blood appears unusually thin and pale. Symptoms appeared suddenly with no obvious cause. Patient weak, pale, confused. Claims to have experienced unusual dreams of standing in the sheriff's shadow for hours, though she cannot explain what this means. December 20th. Treated Elijah Parker for similar symptoms of anemia. Like Martha Sutton, he exhibits pallor, fatigue, and mental confusion. Physical examination reveals small, partially healed puncture wounds at the neck and inner elbow. When questioned, Parker becomes agitated, insisting they are just insect bites, despite it being the dead of winter. December 28th. 3 more cases of severe anemia this week. All patients report unusual lethargy, confusion, and similar dream imagery involving Sheriff Thorne. When I attempted to discuss these patterns with him, he suggested the winter has been particularly hard and offered to arrange additional food supplies from the county stores. His concern seemed genuine, yet I found myself unable to maintain the conversation and quickly agreed with his assessment. The winter of 1881-82 was indeed harsh, with heavy snowfall isolating Hollow Creek for weeks at a time. During this period, Sheriff Thorne reportedly took it upon himself to check on outlying farms and homesteads, often traveling alone in conditions that would deter most men. The sheriff came through 3 feet of snow to bring us medicine when my boy took ill, wrote Elizabeth Parker in her journal. Stayed the night as the storm worsened. Sat by the fire all night without sleeping. My husband said in the morning that the sheriff's presence had given him unusual dreams, though he would not describe them. The boy recovered quickly after the sheriff's visit, faster than seemed natural. We did not speak of this. A weather journal kept by schoolteacher Mary Haskell documents the severity of that winter. January 15th, 1882, 3rd blizzard this month. Drifts now reach second-story windows in places. School closed indefinitely. Sheriff Thorne somehow maintains his rounds despite conditions that keep all others homebound. Saw him this morning standing in the schoolyard looking up at my window. No tracks in the snow leading to where he stood. By spring of 1882, Dr. Jenkins' records show that nearly a third of Hollow Creek's residents had sought treatment for unexplained fatigue, anemia, or confusion. Yet public records from the same period indicate unusually high productivity in the fields and businesses, with crop yields exceeding previous years despite fewer working hours reported. The doctor's professional journal entries become increasingly clinical and detached during this period, focusing on symptoms and treatments while avoiding speculation about causes. However, his personal diary, discovered hidden within the binding of his medical text, reveals deeper concerns. I am beginning to fear that I understand what is happening in Hollow Creek. The pattern is unmistakable, yet so fantastic I hesitate to name it even in these private pages. The sheriff visits homes on a rotating schedule. Following each visit, residents show symptoms consistent with significant blood loss, yet no obvious wounds. Simultaneously, the sheriff himself appears increasingly vigorous. I have observed him lifting loads that would require 2 strong men and standing outside in February, temperatures without coat or gloves, for hours without discomfort. The town prospers even as its people fade, wrote an unnamed correspondent for the Springfield Republican who visited in April 1882. The article was never published, but was found among the collected documents from the courthouse renovation. Sheriff Thorne stands at the center of all activity, though he seems to do little himself. The residents speak of him with a reverence bordering on fear, though none will admit to the latter sentiment when directly questioned. The correspondent's notes continue. Most striking is the physical condition of the townspeople compared to the prosperity of their holdings. Hollow Creek's fields are exceptionally well tended, its livestock fat and healthy, its buildings in perfect repair. Yet the people themselves move like sleepwalkers, thin, pale, with a vacant quality to their expressions. When asked about their evident fatigue, every resident provides the same response, almost word for word. Winter was hard, but the sheriff sees us through. The repetition of this phrase across multiple interviews cannot be coincidental. The most revealing document from this period comes from the personal diary of Michael Sutton, found hidden in the wall of the old Sutton property during renovations in 1952. Sutton, who had been a key figure in the original water rights dispute with the Hargroves, wrote on May 3, 1882, "I know what happened that night at Asher Creek. I know because Jacob told me before he took his family and ran. The sheriff isn't right, hasn't been right since he came here. The shooting should have ended it, but it only made things worse. 6 shots. Jacob swore they all hit true. Said the sheriff, fell into the creek, lay there still for minutes. Then he sat up, slow and strange, water running red around him, stood up and looked at them with eyes that Jacob said weren't human no more. They ran then. Jacob came to me after, wild with fear, said they had to leave immediately, told me to gather my family and do the same. I didn't listen. Now I understand what he meant. The sheriff watches us all, but different now. He takes something from us bit by bit. I feel it draining away when he's near. The council knows. They made some kind of arrangement with him. We get protection, prosperity, order, and he gets whatever he's taking. I've tried to leave twice now. Both times found myself turning back at the county line, like my mind wasn't my own anymore. This will be my last entry. I'm burying this book where maybe someone will find it someday. If you're reading this, don't come to Hollow Creek. Sutton's diary ends with this entry. County records show he continued to live in Hollow Creek until his death in 1903, eventually becoming a member of the town council himself. His death certificate, signed by Dr. Jenkins, lists the cause as general exhaustion, with a notation of extreme anemia as a contributing factor. He was 59 years old. The summer of 1882 marks a turning point in the documented history of Hollow Creek. Public records show a significant increase in productivity and prosperity, with new buildings constructed and trade expanding with neighboring communities. Yet personal accounts from this period become increasingly scarce, as if the residents had collectively decided to stop documenting their private thoughts. One exception is the medical journal of Dr. Jenkins, whose entries become more clinical and detached. June 18, 1882. Anemia cases now affect approximately 60% of the population. Standard treatments show minimal effectiveness. Patients function normally despite blood values that should render them bedridden. Sheriff Thorne has implemented a rotation system for rest and recovery. Efficiency of labor has paradoxically increased by 23% based on my calculations. A disturbing entry from June 27th notes, "Observed Sheriff Thorne at the Miller farm this evening. From my position on the road, I witnessed him place his hand on Thomas Miller's shoulder in what appeared to be a comforting gesture. Miller's expression changed from initial distress to relief over the course of approximately 90 seconds. The sheriff's complexion, previously pale, gained noticeable color during this interaction. This confirms my previous observations, but does not explain the mechanism. The doctor's final entry, dated July 4, 1882, simply states, "I understand now. The arrangement is necessary for our survival. The sheriff ensures it. We provide what he needs, and, in return, we prosper. The transaction is fair. I will not be making further notes on this matter." From this point forward, official records from Hollow Creek show a community functioning with remarkable efficiency and harmony. No crimes were reported between 1882 and 1887. Agricultural output consistently exceeded county averages despite increasingly poor soil conditions noted in regional surveys. Birth rates declined, but so did illness and accidental deaths. A county agricultural assessment from 1885 noted, "Hollow Creek demonstrates unusual productivity given soil quality and available labor. Yields exceed neighboring communities by average of 31%. Livestock appears exceptionally healthy." Residents attribute success to careful management and community cooperation, but offer few specific techniques when questioned. Sheriff Malcolm Thorne remained in his position, with county records showing his reappointment without contest every 2 years. Photographs from this period discovered in the courthouse archives show a man who appeared not to age as expected. While the quality of 19th century photography makes definitive conclusions difficult, comparative analysis conducted by Dr. Klein in 1966 suggests Thorne's appearance changed little over nearly 2 decades of service. The fate of Hollow Creek might have continued in this disturbing equilibrium indefinitely, were it not for the arrival of Dr. Samuel Winslow in the spring of 1899. A young physician from St. Louis, Winslow had been assigned to conduct a regional health survey for the Missouri Medical Society, focusing on isolated communities throughout the Ozarks. His official report, filed in June 1899, noted unusual health patterns in Hollow Creek. The population exhibits widespread anemia and reduced physical vitality, yet functions at efficiency levels that contradict their medical condition. Work output, cognitive function, and general productivity exceed expectations given their physiological state. Sheriff Thorne, who has served the community for over 20 years, appears remarkably well preserved for a man of his age and profession. What the official report didn't include was Winslow's private journal discovered among his effects after his disappearance in August 1899. These personal notes reveal a man increasingly disturbed by what he observed. June 12th. Something is fundamentally wrong in Hollow Creek. The residents move as if choreographed, each performing their function with precision but little genuine animation. They answer questions directly but volunteer nothing. Most disturbing is their collective deference to Sheriff Thorne, whose presence seems to both energize and subdue them simultaneously. June 14th. Met with Dr. Jenkins today. He has served as town physician for over 30 years, but shows little interest in the unusual medical patterns I've observed. When directly questioned about the high incidence of anemia, he recited statistics about improved overall health and reduced mortality without addressing my specific concerns. His manner was cooperative but vacant, as if reciting memorized responses. I noted he avoided all mention of Sheriff Thorne until I raised the subject, at which point he became effusive in his praise of the man's service to the community. June 15th discovered unusual marks on many residents during examinations. Small, nearly healed puncture wounds at the neck, inner elbows, behind knees. When questioned, patients provide identical explanation: must be insect bites. None show concern or discomfort when these areas are examined. June 17th. Visited the site of Asher Creek today, where the sheriff was reportedly shot in 1881. The location is unmarked but known to locals. The creek itself is unremarkable, except for an unusual absence of wildlife. No birds, no fish visible in the clear water. Local guide became agitated when I attempted to collect water samples, insisted we leave before sunset as a precaution, would not elaborate further. June 20th. Witnessed something tonight I cannot rationally explain. Followed Sheriff Thorne after sunset as he made his rounds. He entered the Miller home without knocking. Through the window, I observed the entire family seated in the main room, unmoving, expressions vacant. The sheriff approached each in turn, placed his hand on their shoulder in what appeared to be a comforting gesture. Each person's face showed momentary distress, followed by relief. The sheriff's complexion seemed to brighten with each interaction, while the family members grew paler. The entire process took approximately 20 minutes, after which normal activity resumed as if nothing unusual had occurred. June 23rd. Similar observations at 3 other households. The pattern is consistent. Weekly visits from the sheriff seem to be accepted as routine. Following these interactions, residents display increased energy and productivity for approximately 1 to 2 days, followed by gradual decline until the next visit. The sheriff, meanwhile, appears increasingly vital following each circuit of the town. June 29th. Attempted to question an elderly resident, Martha Sutton, who seems less affected by the community's strange dynamics. She initially appeared willing to speak candidly but fell silent when the sheriff passed by her house during our conversation. After his departure, her manner had changed completely, cooperative but guarded. Before this change, she had begun to say, "It started when he came back from the creek. After the shooting, he wasn't the same, wasn't human anymore in the same." This was when the sheriff appeared, though I had not heard his approach. July 2nd. Attempted to question council member Sutton about the community's unusual relationship with Sheriff Thorne. He responded with practiced ease, "The sheriff takes care of us, and we take care of him. It's been our way since '81. When pressed, his expression changed subtly, becoming momentarily vacant before he excused himself. Found him later with no recollection of our conversation. July 8th. Have begun collecting biological samples from willing participants, citing routine health survey protocols. Blood work confirms severe anemia in approximately 70% of subjects tested. More concerning are the unusual properties of the blood itself: abnormal coagulation rates, atypical cellular structures, and trace compounds I cannot identify with available equipment. Have prepared samples to send to colleagues in St. Louis, but hesitate due to concerns about potential interception. July 15th. The sheriff knows I'm watching. Today he approached me directly, suggested I join him for his evening rounds to better understand the community's health practices. His eyes. I cannot describe the sensation of looking into them. Found myself agreeing despite my reservations. Will prepare accordingly. Dr. Winslow's final entry, dated July 16, 1899, reads, "Have secured samples of my blood and tissue, along with detailed notes, in this sealed container which I've arranged to be delivered to my colleague in Springfield, should I not return from tonight's rounds with the sheriff. My hypothesis is too fantastic to commit to paper without further evidence, which I intend to gather this evening. If something happens to me, the truth about Hollow Creek must be—" The entry ends abruptly. Dr. Winslow was reported missing 3 days later when he failed to arrive for a scheduled meeting in Yellville. A search party found his belongings still in his room at the Hollow Creek boarding house, but no sign of the doctor himself. Sheriff Thorne led the official investigation, which concluded that Winslow likely met with an accident while exploring the rugged terrain around the settlement. His body was never recovered. A subsequent inquiry by the Missouri Medical Society was notably brief. Their representative, Dr. Howard Collins, spent only 2 days in Hollow Creek before filing a report that dismissed concerns about Winslow's disappearance as unfortunate but not suspicious, and praised the community's remarkable health practices and community cohesion. Dr. Collins later became a vocal advocate for the region's self-sufficient medical traditions and relocated to a nearby community in 1901. Most significant among the discovered documents is a sealed container matching the description in Winslow's final journal entry. This container, found during the 1964 courthouse renovation, contained preserved blood and tissue samples, along with a detailed medical analysis that had somehow reached the county records office, despite Winslow's disappearance. The analysis, verified by modern testing conducted at the University of Arkansas Medical Sciences Department in 1967, revealed several anomalies in Winslow's samples. Most notably, they contained trace elements of an unidentified compound that bore similarities to both natural coagulants and stimulants, but with a molecular structure that defied categorization within known biological compounds. More disturbing was the analysis of what Winslow labeled subject T tissue, presumably a sample somehow obtained from Sheriff Thorne. This tissue showed cellular characteristics that the 1967 examination described as exhibiting unprecedented regenerative properties and highly unusual mitochondrial activity. The report cautiously suggested that such cellular structure could theoretically allow for accelerated healing and an abnormal ability to process and utilize biological material from other organisms. The final pages of Winslow's analysis contained what he termed a theoretical model for how a human body might survive catastrophic trauma through a fundamental alteration of its biological processes, a change that would require ongoing supplementation from other living organisms to maintain. In essence, wrote Dr. Eleanor Klein in her 1968 analysis of the Hollow Creek documents, Winslow appears to have been suggesting that Sheriff Thorne had become something parasitic yet symbiotic with the community, neither fully alive nor dead in the conventional sense, but existing in a state that required regular extraction of vital essence from the living to maintain its own function. The scientific terminology used cloaks what in an earlier age might have been described in far more supernatural terms. What happened to Hollow Creek after Dr. Winslow's disappearance is documented primarily through county records and occasional newspaper references. Sheriff Malcolm Thorne continued to serve until 1905, when county reorganization eliminated several small settlements' independent status, including Hollow Creek. Thereafter, the settlement gradually declined, with many families relocating to larger communities in the region. The 1910 census listed only 17 residents remaining in what was now designated as unincorporated territory. By 1920, Hollow Creek no longer appeared in any official records. The land was eventually absorbed into what is now the Mark Twain National Forest, with no physical structures remaining to mark the settlement's existence. Said the place was best left alone. When pressed, he claimed his grandfather had told him that the ground there drinks more than water. The few elderly residents in nearby communities become noticeably uncomfortable when the settlement is mentioned, changing the subject or terminating conversations entirely. The final documented reference to Malcolm Thorne comes from a 1915 article in the Mountain Home Observer describing the funeral of a former county lawman who had served with distinction during the settlement era. The article noted that, despite his advanced age, the deceased maintained a remarkably vigorous appearance until shortly before his passing. No cause of death was recorded. A curious report from a civilian Conservation Corps worker involved in forestry projects in the area in 1935 notes, "Local guide refused to lead us to Old Hollow Creek site." However, a handwritten note found attached to this newspaper clipping in the county archives, apparently added by an unknown archivist, states simply, "Not dead, moved on, seen in Doniphan last spring. Same eyes." Most disturbing among the collected materials is a series of reports from neighboring counties between 1917 and 1958, documenting the appearance of a law enforcement officer matching Thorne's description in small, isolated communities throughout the Ozarks. In each case, the individual's arrival coincided with a period of unusual productivity and prosperity, followed by health concerns similar to those documented in Hollow Creek. In each instance, the officer in question eventually moved on, typically following some form of official inquiry or outside interest in the community. A report from Stone County, dated 1923, describes new Deputy Sheriff T.M. Alford has implemented remarkable improvements in local organization and agricultural methods. Community health concerns, primarily anemia and fatigue, attributed to poor nutrition despite improved crop yields. Deputy Alford, known for visiting outlying homesteads personally, especially during illness or hardship. A similar report from Washington County, Arkansas, dated 1938, mentions Sheriff Malcolm Thomas, well regarded despite unusual methods. Residents describe him as ageless and tireless. Regional health inspectors' concerns about widespread fatigue dismissed by local council as outsider interference. Sheriff relocated following inspector's unexplained disappearance. Position remains vacant. In 1963, during the construction of Bull Shoals Dam, workers uncovered what appeared to be a small family cemetery near where Asher Creek once flowed. The remains of 5 individuals were discovered, 2 adults and 3 children. Forensic examination suggested they had died in the early 1880s. Most notable was evidence that one of the adults, determined to be male, had sustained multiple gunshot wounds prior to death. The location and history matched no official records, but aligned disturbingly well with what we know of the missing Hargrove family. The remains were reinterred in an unmarked section of the Mountain Home Cemetery in 1964. During the ceremony, attended only by county officials and the construction foreman, an elderly man was observed watching from a distance. When approached by the county clerk, the man identified himself as a student of local history and departed before further questions could be asked. The clerk later described the man as having unusually intense eyes that seemed somehow familiar, though I'm certain we had never met. The Hollow Creek case file was officially closed in 1968 when Dr. Eleanor Klein completed her analysis of the collected documents. Her final report to the Arkansas Historical Society concluded, while many elements of the Hollow Creek narrative remain unexplained by contemporary standards, the consistency of accounts across multiple independent sources suggests some factual basis for the core events. What happened to Sheriff Malcolm Thorne on October 17, 1881, fundamentally changed both the man and the community he served, creating a relationship that modern terminology might describe as parasitic, yet mutualistic, a disturbing symbiosis that allowed both to survive, but at a cost we can only speculate upon. The report was submitted but never published. Dr. Klein accepted a position at a university in California shortly afterward and did not pursue further research into Ozark historical anomalies. When contacted by subsequent researchers in 1972, she declined to discuss the Hollow Creek materials, stating only that some aspects of history are better left undisturbed. The documents themselves were archived in the University of Arkansas's special collections but were reportedly lost during a storage facility fire in 1977. Dr. Klein's original report survives only as a carbon copy discovered among her personal effects after her death in 1982. Her autopsy revealed severe, unexplained anemia that had apparently developed rapidly in the weeks before her passing. Her personal journal, found among her effects, contained a single entry related to Hollow Creek, dated 1 month before her death. I dreamed of him again last night, standing by my bed, looking down with those terrible eyes. Each time he seems more real. Each time I wake more tired. I should never have gone to that creek. The area where Hollow Creek once stood remains uninhabited, now submerged beneath the waters of Bull Shoals Lake. Local fishing guides occasionally report unusual cold spots over the location, and some refuse to take clients there, citing inexplicable equipment failures and a persistent sense of being watched. Perhaps most unsettling are the occasional reports from law enforcement officers throughout the Ozarks describing encounters with a tall, lean man of indeterminate age who appears at crime scenes or medical emergencies in remote areas. These reports span from the 1920s through the late 1960s, with the most recent documented sighting occurring near Harrison, Arkansas in 1968. In each case, the individual is described as having an intense, unsettling gaze and unusual knowledge of local geography. He identifies himself as a former lawman or medical professional, offers assistance, and departs before formal identification can be established. Coincidentally or not, several of these sightings have been followed by reports of unexplained medical phenomena in the surrounding communities. Unusual recovery rates from serious injuries, increased productivity despite widespread fatigue, and in some cases clusters of anemia with no clear cause. The truth about Sheriff Malcolm Thorne and what happened at Asher Creek that October night in 1881 remains obscured by time, lost records, and the natural reluctance of those involved to document experiences that defied rational explanation. What seems clear from the surviving evidence is that sometimes survival itself can become a kind of horror, one that transforms both the survivor and those around them in ways that echo through generations. As for the questions that remain, how a man could survive 6 gunshots that should have been fatal, what transformation might have occurred in those dark waters of Asher Creek, and whether something fundamental about human nature might be altered through trauma and necessity. Perhaps it is better that we do not know with certainty. The waters of Bull Shoals Lake now cover the remains of Hollow Creek. Fishermen who drift over its location speak of unusual stillness, of fish that refuse to bite, and occasionally of a reflection in the water that doesn't match the boat above it, a tall figure standing as if watching from below. And in small towns throughout the Ozarks, there persists a cautionary whisper passed between generations. Beware the stranger with the too steady gaze who offers help after tragedy strikes. Beware the man who seems to take your pain away with just a touch, leaving you feeling emptier with each visit. Some debts once incurred can never truly be repaid. Some forms of survival come at costs that extend far beyond the survivor. Some legends, it seems, refuse to die, just as some men, against all natural law, refuse to stay down when shot.